also burns deep underground. There's a fire burning and it's kept me yearning that everything will be alright. The fire's been burning for 5 years and counting. Our hearts have been burning the same. The embers all smolder and never get colder. The landfill at Bridgeton's aflame. I've got just 2 arms to hold you, but I could use a few more. I've got just 2 arms to hold you, but now in the 40s they were testing uranium processing for the Manhattan Project. By college success, the uranium was the best, and the atomic age came on next. But then where to place all this nuclear waste? Oh, don't worry, there's room underground. Out of mind, out of sight, that's the end of our plight. After all, what could possibly go wrong? I've got just 2 arms to hold you, but I could use a few more. Just 2 arms to hold you, but now.
Good morning. Today is Monday, October 31st, 2016, a day held for many centuries as the Celtic festival of Samhain, or Summer's End, to celebrate harvest and rekindle memories of past relatives. You are listening to Map Facts, Environmental Impact Hour. You've just heard the lovely local duo, Southwest Watson Sweethearts, with their song, The Bridgeton Fire, off their album, Endless Horizon, produced by Big Muddy Records. My name is Drew Kuhn. Thank you for joining us. Missouri Accountability Project kicked off in 2015 as a platform of citizen advocacy for protection of environmental, public health, and safety. You can visit us at MissouriAccountabilityProject.org to find our objectives as follows with hyperlinks. We urge EPA to expedite implementation of grid analysis and full removal of all radiologically impacted material from Westlake Landfill's operable Unit 1, 2, and 3 in the 2016 Record of Decision, taking into account the National Remedy Review Board recommendation of such a decision and its cited feasibility. We petition Governor Nixon or Coster facilitate interagency emergency planning between St. Louis and St. Charles County by declaring state of emergency. We demand either Congress, by way of House Bill 4100, now on life support in committee, transfer jurisdiction of Westlake Landfill remediation to the United States Army Corps of Engineers with the aid of formerly utilized sites remedial action program for full removal of radiologically impacted material to a proper containment facility, or by way of the President of the United States making so by executive order, following the bipartisan, unanimously passed Senate bill version. Today, we'll first discuss a letter dated October 14, 2016, from Charlene S. Fish, Professional Engineer, Chief Engineering Section of Solid Waste Management Program of the Missouri Department of Natural Resources, to Aaron Fanning, Division Manager of Public Services, regarding review of detection, monitoring, and assessment monitoring reporting for Republic Services Incorporated. The sampling event identifies statistically significant evidence of contamination that is impacting the quality of groundwater under and or surrounding the Bridgeton landfill. As a result, it is imperative that not only the assessment monitoring plan characterization continue forward, but timely actions be taken to develop and implement final corrective measures. Republic Services Incorporated will need to conduct both the continued characterization assessment and development of corrective measures under a parallel process as is technically feasible. The Solid Waste Management Program received a letter dated August 18, 2014, concerning responses to comments on the assessment monitoring plan for the Bridgeton landfill. As part of the corrective measures to manage and mitigate the impact of the subsurface reaction event occurring in the South Quarry, Republic Services Incorporated has reported the following actions. A progressive cavity pump was installed in leachate collection sumps in February of 2014. The pump is reported to relieve liquid pressure and ensure leachate capture near the 104 well cluster. 104 and 34A were equipped with Blackhawk pumps in June of 2014 to allow for dual gas and liquid extraction from the well. The horizontal connection to gas extraction well 104 was rerouted to supply better vacuum in July of 2014. A lift station and grit chamber was installed. A new leachate force main to reduce backup pressure and blockages was installed. Republic Services has continued monitoring groundwater on a quarterly basis under the AMP. The response to comments on the Assessment Monitoring Plan letter, dated August 18, 2014, and received by the Solid Waste Management Program on August 19, 2014, references specific comment number 2 from the July 30, 2014 letter to Republic Services from the SWMP. The response to specific comment 2 states, "The monitoring approach addressed by the Assessment Monitoring Plan and these responses will allow Bridgeton Landfill to continue to monitor the progress of those corrective measures in addressing exceedances while evaluating additional potential corrective measures." The Solid Waste Management Program notes groundwater monitoring wells continue to demonstrate detections above the maximum contaminant level of volatile organic compounds, including, but not limited to, benzene, toluene, and xylenes. In addition, other volatile organic chemicals, including hexanone, 4-methyl-2-pentanone, acetone, and looks like about 6 others, have been historically detected in wells 104SS and 104SD. The changes to the Assessment Monitoring Plan in the August of 2014 letter appear to be in order and are hereby accepted by the Solid Waste Management Plan. Please submit a complete, updated Assessment Monitoring Plan within 30 days of receipt of this letter, describing any actions not listed in the previous plan and the additional plan updates requested herein. The Solid Waste Management Plan identified statistically significant increases in certain constituents found in the appendix or data portion of this report for detection monitoring, which are detailed below in the specific comment section. Republic Services is required to monitor groundwater on a quarterly basis until such time as notified by the department that increased sampling is no longer necessary, as per cited order. In August of 2015, 5 additional groundwater step-out wells were installed by the state of Missouri. These wells are designated by their labels. The Solid Waste Management Program requested Republic Services to include these wells at a minimum in their quarterly monitoring network and sampling and analysis plan, because these wells have preliminary data showing groundwater contamination off-site. Within 30 days of receipt of this letter, Republic Services shall include, as part of the assessment monitoring, the proposed installation of additional down-gradient monitoring wells to define the rate and extent of affected groundwater within 30 days of receipt of this letter. It goes on into some more mundane details, and the conclusion of this letter as follows. Are the following requirements for Republic Services to, within 30 days of receipt of this letter, providing submittal of the proposed installation of additional down-gradient monitoring wells, within 45 days providing submittal of a review, technical analysis, trend plots, and narrative discussion of historical groundwater monitoring data as part of the assessment monitoring and interim corrective measures, within 45 days providing submittal of a technical report as part of the interim corrective measures that demonstrates the status and effectiveness of leachate and landfill gas extraction source control measures. within 30 days, providing an alternative source demonstration to explain the background well detections in the submitted reports, within 30 days of receipt of this letter, providing a list of groundwater protection standards established due to the confirmed statistically significant inferences for the listed constituent well pairs. Too long didn't read. The state of Missouri continues to find groundwater contamination below and surrounding Bridgeton landfills, citing data of statistical significance that contaminants above the maximum contaminant level as listed in the Clean Water Act continue to be found within groundwater samples. Next, we have 2 of 3 in a series of Westlake updates by the Environmental Protection Agency, Region 7, dated October 25th and 26th of 2016, respectively. Mind you, these reports are written and geared towards public relations, and the language seems to reflect as such. As the present oversight agency of the Superfund site, I find it prudent to hold them to account for their timelines and actions. Many industrial sources emit air pollution in the St. Louis area, including power plants, manufacturers, asphalt plants, and landfills. These sources of air emissions are permitted and regulated primarily by Missouri Department of Natural Resources under a state implementation plan required by the Clean Air Act and approved by EPA. These sources are also subject to a number of federal regulations, such as requirements addressing air toxic emissions. EPA and Missouri DNR have complementary roles for ensuring industries comply with federal, state laws and regulations regarding air quality. EPA delegates portions of its authority for managing environmental programs to the states. As part of this delegation, MDNR has primary responsibility for managing the air program, which includes monitoring, permitting, and enforcement. EPA provides partial funding to support the air activities and has general oversight responsibilities to ensure that the national environmental goals are achieved. Both agencies work together to ensure compliance with the Clean Air Act. From April to June of 2016, EPA conducted 12 Clean Air Act compliance inspections of sources in the Bridgeton, Maryland Heights, and Earth City areas. The purpose of the EPA inspections is to ensure the sources in these areas are in compliance with the Clean Air Act. These efforts are consistent with the EPA national enforcement initiatives, cutting hazardous air pollutants and reducing air pollutions from the largest sources. Specifically, EPA focused on compliance inspections on sources of air emissions of methane, sulfur compounds, or trichloroethylene. One inspection at the Champ landfill, located in Maryland Heights, just across 270 from Bridgeton landfill, found deficiencies with the landfill's surface emission monitoring and surface integrity monitoring required by the Clean Air Act new source performance standards for municipal solid waste landfills. These standards require landfills to collect and control air emissions of landfill gases, including methane. On August 11, 2016, EPA announced a settlement with Champ to bring them back into compliance by implementing numerous measures designed to minimize odors and landfill gas air emissions and ensure ongoing compliance with regulatory requirements of the Clean Air Act. Under the terms of the settlement, Champ Landfill has agreed to conduct a comprehensive third-party audit of its gas collection system and to implement all of the auditor's recommended corrective actions in less than 1 year. Champ Landfill will also install a minimum of 21 additional landfill gas extraction wells. These modifications to the gas collection system are expected to significantly improve its ability to collect gases generated by the landfill, resulting in lower emissions of landfill gas and odors to the surrounding community. Overall, Champ will spend up to an estimated $1.6 million to implement the improvements. As part of the settlement, Champ has agreed to spend nearly $1.3 million to purchase 4 compressed natural gas trash collection trucks to replace existing diesel-fueled vehicles as a voluntary supplemental environmental plan. In addition to EPA's settlement with Champ Landfill, the state of Missouri has issued several notices of violations to Bridgeton Landfill LLC for air permitting violations. Specifically, the NOV notices of violations allege failure to comply with air permitting regulations governing sulfur dioxide emissions from Bridgeton landfill flares. The State of Missouri and Bridgeton Landfill, LLC, are working towards resolving these alleged violations. Recently, Missouri Department of Natural Resources received an air permit application from Bridgeton Landfill to install a post-combustion air pollution control system, including a thermal oxidizer and scrubber, to reduce SO2 emissions from the Bridgeton landfill below applicable permitting thresholds. MDNR is currently reviewing the permit application. In addition to the Bridgeton and Champ landfills, there are other identified sources in the area that require monitoring and inspections to ensure compliance with the Clean Air Act. These sources include vehicle emissions from nearby roads and highways and other industrial sources. EPA and MDNR continue to conduct air monitoring and review the results for the area, require emissions reporting by sources of air toxics, and make actions where necessary to ensure sources are compliant with the Clean Air Act. That is part 1. Part 2 goes more into air monitoring. Since 2013, both EPA and MDNR have conducted air quality monitoring at the Westlake and Bridgeton landfills, respectively, at the fence line and in communities surrounding the Bridgeton landfill. EPA has also established agreements with the Bridgeton Landfill, LLC, owned and operated by Republic Services Incorporated, and the other Westlake landfill responsible parties to conduct on-site air monitoring following strict protocols reviewed by both the agency and the state. The second installment discusses the air monitoring conducted by EPA. MDNR air monitoring will be discussed in the third installment of this series of updates on air quality. From April of 2014 to July of 2015, EPA operated 5 off-site air monitoring stations, collecting samples for radionuclides, including alpha, beta, gamma, and radon, using a variety of both fixed laboratory and field portable instruments. EPA also operated field portable instruments for hydrogen sulfide and total reduced sulfur compounds, SO2, carbon monoxide, and total volatile organic compounds were sampled for specific analytes by both SUMA canisters and by passive diffusion samplers known as radiellos. Hydrogen sulfide was also measured by EPA using radiellos. The results of EPA's off-site air monitoring efforts indicate that VOCs and hydrogen sulfide measured at the 5 off-site stations were generally consistent with urban background, with one expectation. Trichloroethylene, which is a volatile organic chemical, was detected at Station 2 to the northwest of the landfill site at concentrations statistically greater than at the other monitoring stations in the St. Louis Downtown Background Monitor, used for comparison. As discussed in Part 1, EPA investigated the potential for an off-site source of trichloroethylene through compliance inspections of surrounding facilities. No specific sources have yet been identified through compliance inspections. Air monitoring for radionuclides indicated off-site levels are consistent with urban background as well. The results of EPA's air monitoring from April of 14 to July of 15 are available on their website, epa.gov/mo/Westlake Landfill. In April of 14, EPA and the potentially responsible parties, including Bridgeton Landfill LLC, owned and operated again by Republic Services Incorporated, they don't include that, signed off the administrative settlement and order on consent for removal action pre-construction work, which in part required that the PRPs establish an on-site air monitoring network. On December 5th of 14, EPA approved the air monitoring, sampling, and quality assurance and quality control plan and instructed the PRPs to begin baseline air monitoring at Westlake Landfill. The PRPs began on-site air monitoring surrounding the perimeter of OU1 for volatile organic chemicals by radiello passive diffusion samplers and for radionuclides in May of 2015. The PRPs are continuously operating 13 air monitors with 6 surrounding operable Unit 1, Area 1, and another 6 surrounding operable Unit 2, Area 2. The 13th monitor is located in the southwest corner of the site. The air monitoring locations were selected to ensure the network provides coverage around areas 1 and 2 under all wind directions. EPA has received 3 quarterly reports to date. The results indicate that, with the exception of one potentially anomalous result for tooling, the levels of volatile organic chemicals in air on site are less than or within range of levels previously detected by EPA at its 5 off-site monitoring locations. The anomalous tooling detection has not recurred in the second or third quarters. With this exception, all of the remaining VOC air monitoring data collected by EPA or PRPs under EPA's oversight since May of 2015 are consistent with the levels of VOCs reported in downtown St. Louis as measured by MDNR's National Air Toxic Trend Station monitor. For radionuclide samples, the isotopic and gamma spectroscopy results for uranium-238, thorium-230, and combined radium are below the Nuclear Regulatory Commission limits for public exposure. The results for gross alpha, beta, and VOCs are generally consistent with EPA's own previous year-long monitoring effort at 5 off-site locations, including one place in Spanish Village. The quarterly reports are also available on EPA's Westlake website. In April of 2016, EPA and Bridgeton Landfill, LLC signed an administrative settlement agreement in order on consent for removal actions, which required, in part, that Bridgeton Landfill install and operate 2 SO2 ambient air monitors for 1 hour sulfur dioxide measurements for a period of 1 year. The purpose of sulfur dioxide air monitoring under this order is to evaluate levels in the area around the Bridgeton Landfill. Recent landfill gas sampling results provided by Bridgeton to MDNR indicate that the flares located on site may be producing more sulfur dioxide than previously estimated. The precision of these instruments, coupled with methodology being used, will help to provide a more accurate characterization of sulfur dioxide levels. In June of this year, EPA approved the SO2 monitoring work plan and instructed Bridgeton Landfill to begin baseline air monitoring at 2 locations, one near the water tower in Spanish Village and another near St. Charles Rock Road, just north of the Bridgeton Landfill. The new SO2 monitors began collecting data on August 25th of 16. EPA approved the locations to ensure the air monitors provide coverage of emissions under a variety of wind directions. The data is available to the public in a similar format to what is currently available from MDNR's Rider Trail sulfur dioxide monitor located just south of the Bridgeton Landfill. The data for these monitors is available at www.inqenv.com/Bridgeton. Now we have as our guest Carl Stelzer, award-winning investigative journalist. He and Allison Carrick, St. Louis-based independent filmmaker and writer, have collaborated for years to document and screen The First Secret City, a feature-length documentary revealing how workers and residents at a former Dow chemical plant in Venice, Illinois, had been chronically exposed to Cold War-era radioactive contamination without their knowledge for decades. Through a series of interviews, the film follows radioactive trails to Bridgeton and Westlake Landfill.
Thank you for joining us. Tell us where and when can we see The First Secret City next?
Well, we don't have any immediate schedule. I think I take that back. There's a screening that's scheduled for mid-November at Washington University. It's a class that's taught by Michael Allen, I think is his name. Anyway, you might want to check our website for that, or the Facebook page. It's firstsecretcity.com.
Thank you. So, what began your investigation that this film follows?
I started covering this issue back in about 1991 for the Riverfront Times when I was a freelance reporter. And that's when I first met Kay Dry, the environmentalist. And at the time, they were working on the Weldon Spring project, they being the Department of Energy, and she was opposed to part of their plan, which involved draining the contaminated radioactive water in the quarry at Weldon Spring into the Missouri River. They had some settlement ponds that they built, and they claimed that it would have been there would be limited or very little contamination. But she was of the mind that it was substantial enough that it should be opposed. Nevertheless, despite her opposition, that plan went through, and the contaminated water was dumped into the river by the Department of Energy.
So how do you think Allison's creative vision has lent to the telling of the story?
I couldn't have done the film without Allison. I mean, I think one of the things that she brings to it is her eye, okay, and her ability to frame a shot, and also, you know, to understand the complexity of the issue and boil it down into such a way visually that it gets to the essence of what we're speaking about. And so, and to do that, we had to go around and shoot hundreds of hours of B-roll background shots to this film, on both sides of the river.
Yeah, for those who haven't seen the First Secret City, the cinematography in the film is breathtaking, and it does, I think, shed light on how beautiful a city St. Louis is, and it kind of, for me, created kind of a juxtaposition between them.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the great things that she brought to this film, was the fact that we were able to show the juxtaposition is the exact word. You know, there was the stark difference between the industrialized part of St. Louis along with the natural part, and that is the Edward Mallinckrodt, the guy that owned the chemical company that refined the uranium. He had a vision of the world in which he was able to divide things up. So he was a conservationist, and he did a lot of good work in that area. But he was also, you know, this chemical plant, and in his mind, in the way that he plotted everything out, and he could divide the area that was being polluted from the area that he was preserving and keeping pristine. And of course, that's not the way nature works, and it certainly isn't the way that the St. Louis is divided up. So in the telling of the movie, we show these areas that are devastated by decades of pollution, but at the same time, there's a natural beauty that's right next door to it. It could be, and of course, they all share the same aquifer, they share the same air, as do the people.
Yeah, those natural resources connect us. So I really wanted to ask, as an investigative journalist, a veteran investigative journalist, what significant ways have you seen the media landscape shift over decades, and where do you see the future of the Fourth Estate?
Wow, that's a big question. It's a good one, too. I'm not sure, Drew. I think that we're kind of in limbo right now. We're going through a change from the print era, where people actually read hard copy newspapers. Obviously, now most people are getting their news online or on TV, and I kind of bridged that era. So I come from a different century, but it's not altogether good. I mean, there are good aspects of the way things are going, and then there are bad ones, and I don't know if they even out or not, because speaking of and more specifically to this issue in St. Louis, the coverage goes up and down. The Post-Dispatch, for example, covered this issue pretty well, for a period of time. But then, as in May or earlier this year, they kind of did a about face, and they started reporting that more or less there was no problem at Coldwater Creek and Westlake Landfill, and I couldn't disagree more. I mean, and I don't understand why they had that change exactly. I know some of the people down there too. So I think it's unfortunate, and I don't know what was behind their decision, or if there were any kind of outside influences or pressures brought to bear or not.
Also, maybe to consider that you have reporters reporting on issues that maybe don't have the years of experience behind understanding issues, come in and they have to get a brief from their editors to understand just what they're writing about with one particular issue.
And I don't want to like talk down to some of these young reporters are doing outstanding work, okay? But they're under an unbelievable amount of pressure to do this on a daily grind. I never worked for a daily newspaper, so I haven't experienced the kind of deadline pressure. They have weekly deadline pressure was enough for me. But that said, you're correct when you say that they're not really. I don't know how you put it, but
I was trying to say that they're not maybe quite as versed in the complexity and the depth.
Right.
Because, you can follow the story for decades.
Right, exactly. So they're coming in cold. They don't know the subject. They're under deadline pressure, and so one of the things that gets lost in this is the history. Okay, because the daily newspaper mindset is today. They're not looking at yesterday at all. For the most part, was maybe yesterday, but certainly not, 10 years ago. And this story's been going on for decades. So that's definitely a handicap for them. The other thing is that they're, because of their age, I mean, they don't have a personal experience. Okay, but even more so, the Post-Dispatch. Reporting is done on environmental stuff is being handled by the business page. So just the whole viewpoint that they bring to it is pro-business to begin with. I mean, it's not the labor page, it's not the environmental page, it's the business page. So they're reporting on corporations, and more or less, they're bound to report on corporations in a positive way.
Yeah.
And corporations can do positive things, obviously, but they also do, in this case, they're doing unbelievable harm to the environment. And I don't think that the Post-Dispatch is reporting on it as they should, because in the past, going back to 1989, they did an exceptional series that should have won a Pulitzer Prize. And that's the framework. It's part of the framework for our telling of the story in the film is based on that 8-part series from 1989. And one of the reporters that worked on that, Carolyn Bauer, is interviewed in the film. And I can't praise her and the rest of the team that was involved highly enough, because they did the work to uncover what had already by then been forgotten about. And if it wasn't for their early work, our film wouldn't be what it is. So it's not, so I in that respect, I have nothing but praise for the Post-Dispatch, but the recent kind of coverage that they've given it is lacking, to say the least.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, because this needs to be dealt with, and needs to be dealt with back in 1989. For some reason, that series, instead of putting it on the front page, they put it in the everyday section, which is the comic strips, And I don't understand why that decision was made either. So they even though they gave the reporters enough time and enough space to do great work, when it came to publishing, they didn't put it on the front page. They put it, in the back of the paper.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's how it's always been with this. It's terrible.
Yeah. Even to consider the maybe incongruent or conflicting interests when you have business reporters writing about environmental subjects that require a technical understanding and know-how. I mean, I think we see this more broadly with tech reporting. You have and science reporting. You have journalists or bloggers, or anybody can be a media publisher now. But you see reporting on it without necessarily the technical, the context of the field in which they're reporting. So
yeah, I mean, and I got to, I'll say right up front, I'm not a scientist, and these are the most complicated of issues, okay? But it's not just the technical complexity that's the problem. It's the viewpoint from which they're choosing to tell the story, and it's the sources that they're using. For example, they trot out these alleged experts, but the alleged experts all have ties to the nuclear industry.
Right.
So you only get in one side of the story.
Yeah, from lobby.
And that is like, it's not balanced, it's not fair, and it's not accurate. And so when they do that, I don't understand how they think they're serving the public. I almost feel like they're trying to, they're concerned not only for the economic interest and real estate interest, but also perhaps if they want to give them the benefit of the doubt, they're afraid that this is causing panic and they want to tamp down the problem. Okay, which I can that's somewhat understandable, but the ends to which they went to dismiss this is unconscionable. I've never seen anything like it, and I don't understand it.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, I'm not sure exactly what your educational background is, but as an investigative reporter for many decades, you've done your homework, you've done research, and done all the footwork to put these stories together. And what I try to do is I translate. So I go to a source, I go to an expert source. I have them explain it to me, and I'll sometimes in the past I would even say, explain this to me like you're explaining it to an eighth grader or something. Okay. Or if I had any questions about it, I if I didn't understand what they'd say, I'd tell them to slow down and back up. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so I acted basically, acted as a translator, okay, of the information. And that's a difficult task in itself. Right. But I'm not a scientific expert. But it all depends on who you're going to ask the questions, what kind of answers you're going to get. Mm-hmm. And they're going to people that are going to give pro-nuclear answers. That's what they did in the terrible story that they ran, I think, on May 15th. Right. And I guess I can't. I'm 23 years old, and I have digested most of my understanding of media primarily through digital sources. So with that kind of shifting, you have a different ad revenue model also. You're more beholden to ad revenues to prop up your platform and driving towards clicks, getting clicks on your articles and advertisements and such. But obviously,
the Post-Dispatch has been in trouble for years. Okay, almost since even before it was sold, and particularly since it's been sold to Lee Enterprises, which is a chain, a newspaper chain is based in Davenport, Iowa. It's the Post-Dispatch used to be owned by the Pulitzer Company. The people that have their name on the Pulitzer Prize.
Yeah. Well,
they don't have that now. They don't have the budget. They don't have the staff that they used to have, and I don't think they necessarily have the same kind of adherence to their own platform that they used to have. Okay, unfortunately. And I hate to say that. I know there's a lot of good people that are still working down there, and they're working their tails off too because they got such a skeleton crew. So in most cases, they're doing the best they can with limited resources. But in the case of this particular issue, the radioactive waste at Westlake and Coldwater Creek, they fell down. And it's not really, you can't explain that away simply because of lack of resources.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
So, any closing remarks on Bridgeton Westlake landfill? Do you see a record of decision being timely or favorable to some of the community's concerns?
I don't know. I don't think anything's going to happen before next year now, obviously, because of the upcoming election and the lame duck Congress. And it's probably going to be sometime into the new administration and new Congress before they even start picking us back up. And that, again, that delay, this issue has been delayed over and over again as far as trying to get something done about it. And it's kind of, we made the film to address this, to bring it to the public attention, and hopefully to get Westlake as well as the other sites in St. Louis County, some of which we don't even know about yet, cleaned up. And it hasn't happened. And so it's very frustrating because of course, there was all the work that all these other people did, that are in the film that's being ignored, and I just the elected officials are not, doing their job. Okay, that's the bottom line.
Yep.
They have not done what is needed to get this cleaned up, and I don't know why. I mean, this is a serious issue that's been overlooked, literally since World War II.
Yeah.
Now, so before I was born, and I'm 65 years old. So, I hope that when you're 65 years old, by the time you're 65, they will have dealt with this. Because it only took them 3 years to build the atomic bomb, okay? But the waste that they created at the beginning of that project is still sitting around St. Louis, affecting people's health.
Yeah, that's even just in the short, I don't know, I would say six years or so that I've been aware of this. That seems like a recurrent theme. Hold on and wait.
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes I just don't get it because, you say, well, they don't have the money for it, but,
the money's there.
They're not talking about that much money given, how much money that they throw away every year in the federal budget, okay? Mm-hmm. This is $400 million that they estimate would cost to clean up Westlake, and why they can't, they need it. If they can't get it through the EPA or the Corps of Engineers, then there should be. They should find another route, okay, to get the funding. And there's more than one way to go about doing this, and I feel like they keep acting like there's not enough money in one of these pots or the other pot, and they keep passing the blame and responsibility from one agency to the other. That just doesn't get it. How long are they going to play that game? Because it's done under the control of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the Department of Energy, and the EPA.
Yeah, and the EPA.
And, and the Corps of Engineers, and, all of them together have not been able to solve this problem. Is that the definition of incompetence or what?
Ooh, yeah, I don't know. It's maybe a fine line between incompetence and negligence. But
right, there you go. Exactly. I think it does border on negligence if it isn't negligence itself. I mean, and there's I think it borders on criminal actually. Yeah. And that's what needs to be. Somebody needs to be held accountable here. This is nothing, we've been playing patty cake with these agencies and the politicians long enough. I know I'm speaking. Obviously, I'm supposed to be. I'm not impartial. Okay, I'm not. I have a point of view here. Obviously, even as a reporter, when we made the film, we didn't get ourselves involved. Okay, we backed off. We went to all the meetings. We filmed them. We interviewed the people, and we let them tell their story. But now, a year after the film's been out and nothing has much changed, it's more than a little aggravating to me, because any other issue that you can think of is getting more attention than this now, whether it's here in St. Louis or elsewhere.
Yep.
The World Series, professional sports. People's attention are on those kind of issues. Those things of everybody needs recreation and entertainment. I certainly do. So where's the priority here? Both in the media and within the political establishment and the business establishment, everybody's to blame here as far as I'm concerned. Nobody's stepping up, and there needs to be a consensus, and people need to get off their rear ends and do something about this for the good of the overall community. Everything about it, obviously the people and their health, but also the economic health of the community.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that on a note about priorities, that for many of us here locally in North County, St. Louis, this has remained a priority because it's something immediate. For us, it's this is newsworthy, and so I hope with this show that may be able to reach more of a broader audience. I know this has reached national platforms in the past, and any efforts that we might here be able to accomplish, and helping other folks see the interconnected nature of this problem of nuclear waste, and also of the precedent set by the regulatory agencies that are handling this. I think that could be a service in the long run.
Oh, absolutely. Every bit helps. One day at a time, try to do what we can, and that's what you're doing. So I appreciate, what you're doing.
On October 20th, 2016, NPR reports, the Environmental Agency had the authority and information to issue an emergency order protecting residents of Flint, Michigan from lead-tainted water a full 7 months before it did so. An EPA internal investigation has concluded. Quote, it is clear the EPA intervention was delayed, the report from the EPA's Inspector General states. These situations should generate a greater sense of urgency. By June of 2015, the EPA's regional office, quote, had information the city of Flint exceeded the lead level at which corrosion control is required, and that Flint was not using a corrosion inhibitor. It also knew that the testing showed high levels of lead in at least 4 homes. Finally, the regional office, quote, knew the state and local authorities were not acting quickly to protect human health. That is enough to issue an emergency order, the report says. Such action, quote, should have required the city and state to provide alternative water supplies to affected residents, study the extent and severity of lead contamination within the water system, or immediately begin corrective actions to reduce and eliminate lead contamination in the drinking water system. And yet, the EPA did not issue an order until January of 2016. According to the report, local authorities, quote, believe that the state of Michigan's actions to address the Flint situation barred formal federal action, but that was incorrect. The Safe Drinking Water Act states that the EPA can take action if, quote, state actions are deemed insufficient. The watchdog's report concludes that the agency, quote, needs to clarify for its employees how its emergency authority can and should be used to intervene in a public health threat. The EPA is among other people and groups under fire for the slow response to Flint's lead-laced water. An independent task force concluded earlier this year that a state environmental agency called the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality bears primary responsibility, though others are also to blame. The problem began when Flint switched to a new water source in 2014 for cost reasons. But water from that new source, the Flint River, was not adequately treated with corrosion controls and caused lead from the city's pipes to leach into the drinking water supply. And as we've reported, the city switched back to its original water supply late last year, but it was too late to reverse the damage to the pipes. The city is in the process of treating its water system, and recent test results show that lead levels have improved. High levels of lead are especially dangerous for children and can cause learning disabilities, behavioral problems, and mental retardation, the World Health Organization cites. Catching up on the lead crisis in Flint brings us to a newer report in the New York Times on October 28th. So far, 9 low-level or mid-level government officials have been criminally charged as part of the state's investigation into water contamination, which has been tied to lead poisoning in children and the deaths of 12 people from Legionnaire's disease. In recent weeks, however, there have been growing indications that investigators are focusing on bigger targets, and they seem to be looking more intently at the state's failure to respond to the Legionnaire's cases. 12 people have died, said Bill Shute, Michigan's Attorney General, who is leading the investigation. That is certainly a high priority for us. Some in the state hierarchy appear to be bracing for another round of arrests. Mr. Shute, in an interview Monday in his Lansing office, declined to speak about potential suspects or additional charges. But Nick Lyon, the director of Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, was told in a letter that he is the target of the investigation. His lawyer said Governor Rick Snyder, who has apologized for not acting sooner to help Flint, but denied committing a crime, has hired lawyers paid for by taxpayers and provided the Attorney General with documents. Mr. Shute said a number of people have received target letters. In the words of the late great Joe Hill, don't mourn, organize. I have an update here from the Indigenous Environmental Network on the mounting resistance of construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline on Standing Rock Sioux Reservation territory. This was reported Sunday, October 30th. Despite escalating police violence and AFL-CIO leadership of the pipeline, a delegation of union members from around the United States are spending the weekend of October 29th at Standing Rock Camp to join Sioux water protectors against Dakota Access Pipeline. The delegation from Labor for Standing Rock comprised of rank-and-file union members and working people. Liam Kane, union laborer at Leuna Local 1271 in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and a Labor for Standing Rock spokesperson, over years worked on numerous heavy construction sites and pipeline construction spreads. To the union laborers working on these projects, I would just implore you to listen to what regular folks are saying. Mind your bosses and the echo chambers on the spread. But listen to the water protectors. Listen to folks talking about just transition, a view of the future, involving good-paying union jobs, involving many of your skill sets. Just generating energy in a much more environmentally sustainable manner, rather than just gross over-reliance on fossil fuels that we currently engage in. As the saying goes, there's no jobs on a dead planet. Cliff Wellmang is a registered nurse at the UFCW Local 7 and former member of the United Brotherhood of Carpenters Local 1 in Chicago. He is a leader in the Colorado fight against fracking, a rank-and-file labor activist and organizer for the Colorado Community Rights Amendment. Cliff's work against the oil and gas industry made national headlines when Lafayette, Colorado banned fracking in 2013. He and his daughter Sasha delivered water tanks to Standing Rock Camp after authorities removed the water supply in August. As a healthcare provider, as a father of 2, and as a union member, I will be heading to Standing Rock, said Wilming, union member and co-founder of LSR. We will be supporting the First Nations fight against the Dakota Access Pipeline to protect the environment for my kids, and as a rejection of the decision of the AFL-CIO support of the pipeline. Michael Letwin is a former president of the Association of Legal Aid Attorneys, UAW Local 2325 in New York City, and co-convener of the Labor for Palestine, whose online petition in opposition to Dakota Access Pipeline has garnered more than 12,000 signatures and helped lay the basis for Labor for Standing Rock. In 1973, At age 16, he and others were arrested by the Nixon-era FBI under the Rap Brown Act for participating in a relief caravan to the American Indian Movement occupation at Wounded Knee. Escalating police attacks against unarmed water protectors at Standing Rock on behalf of the oil and gas industry evokes images of Wounded Knee in 1890 and 1973, brutally against the civil rights movement and state violence today from Ferguson to Baltimore to Palestine, Letwin said. The labor movement has faced similar violence throughout its history, and from the same forces of greed and injustice. Labor for Standing Rock was created by rank-and-file workers and union members to mobilize growing labor support for the First Nations fight against the Dakota Access Pipeline. The response from working people around the country has been nothing short of staggering. It is clear that the labor movement is no longer content to sit aside while the Native American sovereignty is violated and while land and water rights risked. No oil company profits are more important than our rights in the environment. We at Osete Sakowin's camp welcome any and all support from our union brothers and sisters, said Standing Rock Council in an October 13th message to Labor for Standing Rock. This camp stands to protect our sacred water and to support a new energy paradigm, jobs and work in green energy fields. We welcome your support in any way you feel appropriate. Join us in paving a new road to a sustainable future for many generations. We'll conclude our show today with
On the Tracks you can catch every Monday night and Friday.